we will welcome others who join us, but I'm Jean Hardy Robinson, and I'd like to say welcome to the July meeting of the Philanthropy Club. And as you know, as you signed up, our topic today is cybersecurity post-pandemic. Okay, we're not totally post-pandemic, but as we're moving out of the pandemic. So we have two experts who are going to enlighten us both on cybersecurity risks and ways that your organization can protect itself against those risks. We're still meeting virtually, but I don't want to lose a tradition that we've had for years at the Philanthropy Club, which is inviting everybody in the chat to give your name and your affiliation. It just is a nice kind of a way of audience analysis, and also that you can connect, a little networking, even though it's virtual. So as we have been told in the not in the Q&A and the chat, that you can use the chat for questions as we move along, but you can use the I said that wrong, didn't I? Use the Q&A for questions and use the chat to identify yourself and to connect with other people. So first of all, I want to thank Key Montgomery, who has taken care of the logistics at Forefront for us. And we're happy that Forefront has been hosting the Philanthropy Club for, I think she said now, about 3 years. And we always want to thank Gus Wilhelmy, our founder, for the idea, and for the volunteers, a group of us who get together every year, try to decide what topics are going to be of most current interest to those of you out there in the funder or the not-for-profit or the consultant sector, and then volunteer to put together a good program. So if you are interested in being more involved in the Philanthropy Club, you can contact me, or you can contact Key Montgomery at Forefront, and we'll let you know when we're next going to get together and talk about topics for next year. So I think we'll move right on to the program. I've worked as a management consultant for decades and with non-for-profits, and I think it's fair to generalize that most have underinvested in technology generally and in cybersecurity in particular. And I've observed a fairly common lack of technology comfort among leaders and tight budgets that have made it hard to invest in hardware or software or expertise. And adding to that, the pandemic has just brought a whole new family of challenges. I'm working with a small organization right now that didn't move from desktop to cloud-based accounting software until recently. And that caused a lot of problems just producing monthly financial reports throughout the pandemic, because everyone was working at home. And we talked as we prepared this program about the news, the daily news of the hacks that are attacking major organizations and corporations, and we're all getting solicitations, phishing of all kinds. So we know how vulnerable we are. So we've invited two experts, Michal Khan, who is, get this, a certified ethical hacker. So Michal is here to scare you a little, and because he wants you to know that it's important to recognize threats. And then we have Gregory Perrine, who's a consultant who provides technology solutions, among other services. And we think he'll give you an outline of some work that you need to do to counter those risks that Michal has highlighted. So we want this to be an interactive session, and I'll let Michal and Gregory manage whether to respond to questions as they go, or they'll watch the chat, or whether to defer them to later in the program. So Michal and Gregory, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you everyone for attending on this somewhat foggy morning if you're in the Chicagoland area, but summer is here, even though we haven't felt much of it as of late. But thanks to Forefront, obviously, for hosting, for the Philanthropy Club, for connecting the dots, and for hosting as well, and Jean for finding both Michal and I. So I'm going to share my screen here, and today's format is Michal and I are going to ping pong kind of back and forth. We're going to go through some topics that are going to be super relevant to you, and then also demonstrate, so a little tell and then show, so that you can really sink your teeth into some of these concepts as well. So as we're jumping in, let me share this out here. I do have the chat open and the Q&A open on my screen. So you're welcome to use those as we go through, and whomever's not speaking will continue to monitor that, and we'll try to get answers as we go through. So kicking things off, a little bit about who eGuide and who Mindsight is. I started eGuide in 2016 with a passion to help people with technology. Flash forward a couple of years, really what we've discovered is that we are most effective in the self-funded small business space and the emerging nonprofit space. And what I mean by emerging is generally smaller teams with tighter budgets, not as much funding. And so we really focused on the fundamentals of setting up good technology framework. And a big piece of that puzzle is also security. So that's where I'm coming from in today's is more focused on the user, on the education side, things that no matter what your budget is, you can take away and start applying into your organizations as soon as we jump off of this meeting. We've been going since 2016. Our team is 10 people strong, and we now operate from coast to coast in a virtual environment. So as this topic has come about as well, we've been going through that same transition that some of your organizations are as well, of really sinking our teeth into what it means to be a virtual team. And Michelle, how about you?
Yeah, so I work for Mindsight, which is a technology partner in the western suburbs of Chicago. We're also a small company, 70 odd people. I'm the cybersecurity practice lead, or the virtual CISO there. Similar solutions we provide around security, voice over IP, data center, networking, and anything relating to security or technology. We deal with that. And we deal with a lot of nonprofits, and our target clientele are the mid-market, those who need security and consulting the most. We basically cater for them. Yeah. Gregory, back to you.
Excellent. So some of those topics that we want to hit on today are understanding some of the key terminology of what makes for a strong digital security or cybersecurity presence. So a lot of what we're finding is that when the term of cybersecurity comes up for emerging nonprofits or even larger nonprofits, it's under this cloud of it's way too technical for me to understand. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be secure, so why even try? So I think understanding some of those key concepts in today's presentation allows you to build some of that confidence and build some of that security. We'll also learn some ways to protect your organization. So some of these things you may already be doing. No apologies that it's refreshing. It's just bringing it to the top of your mind. But also it's a great way to introduce some new concepts and maybe provide some nuggets for you to chew on as you go through the next planning months for your organization. And finally, or nextly, we will talk through some common cybersecurity attacks. Just as we were prepping for the webinar today, Key mentioned a couple of the common ones from common phishing attacks that are out there. And we'll illustrate those, or Michelle will illustrate those for us to look through today. And ultimately, we want you to build some confidence in what your organization is doing, or build some security by understanding what you're not doing as well. So I think to start things off, it's really important to understand the landscape. And what I mean by that is, what are other nonprofits doing to protect, or what are other nonprofits not doing to protect their organization? And for that, I think turning to some key statistics are very insightful to at least give you some peace of mind that you're not the only one in the boat if you're not doing everything that you should be doing, but also that there's plenty of room for improvement for all organizations. So taking a look at the screen here, 66% of Americans, and this is general population in America, and I guarantee you that everyone is probably somewhat guilty of this on this call, and I will say that I'm probably guilty of this as well, that using the same password for multiple accounts out of ease, right? So think through the amount of accounts that you have to manage a password for. That's think I summed it up using my LastPass account, and I had over 235 different accounts that I have access to via clients or via myself that require some sort of password. So staying up to date and keeping those passwords current is a huge piece of cybersecurity. 56% of nonprofits don't use multi-factor authentication. So we're going to explain what multi-factor authentication is and how that's going to help to secure your digital footprint as well. 26% of nonprofits actively monitor their network environments. That means almost 75% don't know what's happening on their employees' devices, and or they're not even imparting some best practices for making sure that company issued or organization issued equipment is being upkept in any way, shape, or form. And that's a huge piece of kind of protecting some of that sensitive data as we're transitioning out of the pandemic into a potentially hybrid work model where people are going to be taking their devices with them and connecting wherever they may be. And that could be a cafe, that could be a hotel, that could be their home. So really understanding how to protect yourself in those situations is super important as well. 59% of nonprofits don't provide any sort of cybersecurity training or digital security training for their staff. And that's a big piece of what eGuide does as well, is really understanding those fundamentals and preaching and practicing some of those operational tactics that you can take as an organization to educate your users. It's a part of the puzzle to use automation and use systems to monitor your team. It's a whole other part to educate your team so that they're doing it natively with the documents, and you're protecting some of the security discrepancies and shortcomings within your process as well. 94% of malware, and this is probably the most common one that everyone has come into contact with, is delivered via email. And we're going to go through one of those common phishing scams today, like I said before, but that's almost 100%, right? 94% of that is coming through your emails. So if you're going to take anything away, if you're going to protect one account after you jump off of this webinar, your email is going to be that crucial one that if you haven't updated your email password, if you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on for your email, I would strongly encourage doing that immediately following that, and then imparting that for the rest of your teams as well. 51% of organizations are adjusting their organizations to allow for work from home. And you're probably potentially going through that transition for your organizations as well. And so that's about 50% that may have been completely in office pre-pandemic that are going to be somewhat hybrid or fully transitioning to a virtual work environment on the other end of the pandemic. And really understanding how to protect a home network, how to protect your issued equipment in people's homes that they're working from is a very different landscape than protecting just the office space yourself. So Michelle and I will kind of illustrate some of those things that you can do throughout this presentation to also heighten some of that in-home security as well. So I think it all starts with the fundamentals. And for me, that's somewhat of the password best practices. We're going to go through a couple options, starting with the basics of what makes a good password. But a lot of this comes from the upkeep and the maintenance of making sure these passwords get circulated, that you have some other tools that you can even automate a strong password so you don't have to think about it. And Michelle will illustrate as well quick, easy things that you can integrate into your workflow that make it so that you don't ever have to remember some of those 200 and some passwords that you have floating around. But let's break down what a good password looks like. So it's pretty rare these days to be able to not create a secure password. As you've probably registered for new accounts, whether it be personally or professionally, you're getting those strong password gauges on the bottom of your screen as you're setting up those accounts. And that's going to follow some of these best practices here. So what we're looking for in a secure password is uppercase and lowercase characters. We want special characters, numbers and letters. And if possible, if Google is suggesting a password, we're going to talk about not storing your passwords within your browser, but if you're using a password storage tool, automating some of those passwords is the most secure way. Now, if you're going about it where you like to have everything written down in a journal next to your computer with all of your passwords in it, speaking from experience from dealing with some of our partners and organizations, a password storage manager is going to be your best friend moving forward. Those passwords will travel with you wherever you go, and you'll have access to those through a secure app or through logging into the platform online, which will eliminate some of that need of carrying around all of your passwords with you. So if you like to create those passwords, another good example that I like to share is try to come up with some sort of code for yourself based on the platform that you're logging into. So if I was creating an account for eGuide Tech Allies, my company, this good example that I have illustrated here basically spells the word eGuide Tech Allies, but for someone to be able to crack the code on uppercase and lowercase special characters instead of, alphabetical characters, it would be really hard for them to come into that same pattern of characters that I'm using for this good example. So you can train yourself to capitalize every third character, to replace exclamation points with I's, to replace S's with dollar signs, as a way for you to kind of code in what that password would be and make the actual password something super simple for yourself. That's probably the easiest way to go about natively creating passwords. But again, using the password storage tools and automating those passwords is probably the most secure way for that as well. Things not to do. Still shocking to see that we're getting passwords that are created by the majority, a good portion of Americans, I think it was 25%, that are still using their first and last name. They're still using the characters 1, 2, 3, 4. They're still using generic passwords like password. Any of that, if you know that you have passwords out there that are so simple, it's basically an ask to just get hacked. Especially if that is your email address. Keep in mind, anytime that someone is accessing your email, you're basically giving them the keys to come into any of your accounts using the forgot password functionality. So if your bank and your email are not protected, those are the top two that I would recommend paying special attention to. So password storage tools, there are tons of them out there. Generally speaking, there are some free ones, there are some paid ones. If you're using a managed hardware manager like Bitwarden or Bitdefender, some of those have built-in password tools that come out of the box for you to use. It's all in implementing that best practice though, right? So LastPass is the one that eGuide uses. It's a Chrome extension, so I don't have to save any of my passwords to Chrome. I'm able to easily save passwords as I'm logging into accounts using that Chrome extension. Everything's encrypted in LastPass. And what's nice about this as well, if, like many nonprofits are, if you're sharing credentials, so Canva, say your marketing department is using Canva and you have one account that has the majority of the files in there for design pieces. Instead of, paying for a paid subscription, we see this a lot of the times, you're sharing, an account between team members. Instead of emailing the login credentials, utilizing LastPass to securely share the login credentials between accounts, between employees is a great way to heighten your security best practices. So Michelle's gonna show us Bitwarden today, but know that there's some other options out there as well. Keeper, Dashlane, LastPass, Bitdefender, Total Security are just some to allude to. More importantly, especially when it comes to your email and bank accounts, and really anytime that the opportunity is available, turn on multi-factor authentication. So a common distinction or clarification is between two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Basically, it's like geometry, right? So multi-factor includes two-factor authentication, but what multi-factor does as well is it might be more than 2 steps to gain access to that account. What that does is that it's going to send out that alert from your mobile device. It might come in an email, and you might have to initialize some of those requests or insert a code to gain access to those accounts. A lot of the times for nonprofits that are, super busy, who don't have time to, take a second step in all of this, we hear that feedback a lot. And it's something that can be as seamless as having your phone and clicking on a button. It doesn't have to be this drawn out process where you're logging into your email, you're looking for a different account, you're looking for a code, especially when it comes to email, because it is the most sensitive area where you can protect some of that information. Turning on multi-factor authentication is almost a must at this point. You can, as an organization, also control this, whether you're a Office 365 or Microsoft Office company or a G Suite company on the admin side, to toggle on that it is a requirement to have multi-factor authentication turned on for all employees. That simple step can mean that you're going to heighten your security and potentially prevent some of your employee accounts from being compromised in that process as well. So illustrating on the screen here, basically what that looks like, and Michelle will demonstrate this as well. We're going to log in, we're going to receive some sort of code on an external device or in an email. Sometimes we might need a fingerprint, and then we'll gain access to that account. To that, I will turn it over to Michelle to share our first demo. One second.
Thank you.
There you go.
My screen. Thank you, Gregory, for that wonderful demonstration. Can you see my screen, just to confirm?
Yes. All
right, perfect. To start this off, I want to just demonstrate how insecure passwords are, to kind of take you through the flow of what is recommended and what are best practices. So here's a website called passwordsecurity.info. If I enter the word in here, password, PASSWORD, what it says is this was in the top 5 most used passwords. So it's an extremely common password. What this site does is it takes into account all the data breaches, which are happening almost on a daily basis now. Almost every company has been breached or will be breached, and their usernames and passwords are harvested and collected. And websites like this and many others, they collect it for statistics and stuff. So according to this, if you have the word password, that's the top 5 most used passwords. If you add complexity to it, like Gregory mentioned, let's add a 1 to it, or let's add 2, 3. So password 1, 2, 3. It's checking in its database, and again, this has been found 126,000 times in password breaches online. So even that is very common. If I start adding random characters, let me add an exclamation mark to this, and it's checking, it's still been used. Let's add a whole bunch of other random characters. I'm just randomly typing this, making it super long. And it says that this password has never been breached, not to say it won't ever be breached, but here it says it will take 45 quadrillion years to crack your password. When I look at this as a pen tester, so I do security penetration testing and stuff. When I look at this, it shows me, okay, so you're telling me there's a chance. It can still be cracked. No password cannot be cracked. I mean, it's just a matter of time, or until you put it in a phishing email, which I'll demonstrate in a bit, and you provide the password to someone. So no matter what password you put, it can still be leaked, breached. Your account can still be compromised. So what I do is I don't remember any of my passwords. I use a password manager to do that for me. And my password manager of choice is Bitwarden. It's open source, it's free. It has a paid tier as well, but there's plenty of other password managers. my recommendation is to use one that is not tied to a certain browser or an operating system. So like Apple has one called the iCloud Keychain. Microsoft has their own. Browsers have their own, Firefox and Safari, and all of them ask to store passwords. The problem with those are, what if you're not on an Apple device and you're on a Windows device? Then the iCloud Keychain won't populate your passwords automatically. So I use something that's kind of independent. With this, so once you have your passwords in place, even though they're super long and a password manager is protecting it, you add one more layer of security, just like Gregory mentioned, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. The best way to demo that is Duo is one of the providers, and there's plenty of others. I mentioned them because there's a cool demo on their website. So if you go to their website, demo.duo.com, here's a neat little demo. So you put in your email and password, you click sign in, and it asks you for that second factor. So in this case, let's do a push notification. So this thing would pop up and send push notification. Now on your phone, this thing pops up which says, either allow or deny. So this is the second factor. If I click on this, in a normal scenario, your phone will ask you to unlock it with a thumbprint or a passcode. Now that's the second factor. And now this accept and deny button is the third factor. So you need to have the phone with you physically. You need to have your biometrics with you, your thumbprint, if you've enabled that, or facial recognition. And then you have to press approve or deny. And you click on approve, and this web page here now proceeds to the next one, which is the email here. So in very few steps, you accomplished account login through 3 different factors of authentication. Now to bypass this, the bad guys would not only need your password, but your phone and your thumbprint, or even to get 2 of those 3 would be extremely difficult. Not impossible, but extremely difficult. And that's how all accounts should be set up, in my opinion. Wherever possible, enable two-factor or multi-factor authentication. What I use as the second factor is not an SMS nor a push notification. It's something called a hardware key, which kind of looks like this here. So this is the exact product that I have, this one in particular. It's a USB-C device. I plug it in and I have to touch one of these metal traces on the sides. So I have to have physical possession of this, plug it in and touch it. So let's go through an actual scenario. So let me log into my Twitter account, and the exciting stuff here is I'm going to show you my password. So let's log in, and this is not my real account. Obviously, this is just we call it a alias account. So the moment I went to the login page, it auto-populated username and password because I have Bitwarden running on the side here as a plugin. And you can see my on Bitwarden. Let me show you the password. This is the password for my Twitter account. There's no way I can remember this or type it. This is over 50 characters long. And you can also see the second factor. So if you actually want to log in, you're quick enough to do it. You need the password. You need this 6-digit code. That's a rolling code here. You need to enter that when the screen changes, and you'll be able to log in. So the way I would log in is this pops up. I press login. Now it asks me for that hardware key. This little notification tells me, touch the USB key that's in your thing. Let me reach out and touch it, tap, and that's it. I'm in. All that process took was literally 10 seconds if I wasn't talking, or even less, 2 seconds, I want to say. So that's how quick and easy it is. I get a lot of pushback from people. Oh, two-factor authentication is too much, or a password manager is, there's a learning curve. Once you get past the initial setup, which may take, an hour at most for all of these things, this is how easy your life becomes. All of my passwords are stored in a password manager. The only password that I remember is the password to unlock my password manager, which is called the master password. So I only have to remember one super strong password, and the rest of last time I checked, I had over 600-700 passwords in the password manager over the years. So it just makes my life much easier with this entire process. Gregory, you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I love that illustration. And same here. Organizations that we're working with, it's that time factor, it's that activation energy for people to make that shift. And now's the time to do that, right? So if you're transitioning from a in-office environment into a hybrid work environment or a completely virtual environment, what a great excuse to do an assessment with your team to say, hey, let's make some of these transitions that are going to make us more secure as organizations. And press some of that reset button as we're going into this. Sure, it's going to add a project to our list, but also when you frame it in a way for your team and your employees, that this is something that if you potentially are compromised or your account is compromised, and because sensitive information gets leaked from your account, that could potentially be a huge lawsuit or some sort of decrease in funding that the organization could receive because we are not following best cybersecurity practices. So I would say the majority of nonprofit workers are there for the cause and for the reason. And if you frame it in a way that makes sense to them, that they're doing their part in the greater rollout of the plan and the protection plan, then there's buy-in from the employees. And that's when I think that it makes more sense to them to make that shift. So awesome.
There's a question in the Q&A around password managers. Let me take one of those questions. Ali asks, how do you protect your password manager password itself? So the master password, and how often do you change this and other passwords? So my master password is extremely important because that unlocks all the rest of my passwords. So how do I protect it? All password managers have two-factor authentication built into it as well. So the first time I log in to my password manager, so let's say if it's a browser extension in Firefox or the application on my phone or desktop, or the website for the password manager, whatever avenue I take to log in, it'll ask me for that second factor, which is either my phone will buzz or an SMS will come in, or I need to insert that YubiKey and touch it. So either way, 2FA, MFA should be enabled for your master password, and you should not store it anywhere online, at least. So don't write your master password in a text file or an Excel sheet, or store it in the master password itself or somewhere. If you want to write it down on a piece of paper, put it in somewhere safe in your house in case you forget. But protect it with your life. You don't need to change it too often. If it's strong enough, if it's long enough, and it's not part of any breach or anything, you don't need to change it too often. I honestly change it every couple of years probably, and very slightly, because I don't like to remember too many things besides that one password. And how often do I change the rest of the passwords? It depends. It depends how important that account is for me. I have a bunch of accounts which I probably log into once a year. Those are not important to me at all. Those I may never change. They have a nice, strong password with MFA, and I won't change it. Maybe a couple of years, maybe never. But the ones that are important to me, like my primary email accounts or my bank logins or my cryptocurrency logins or anything that's important to me, I will change those maybe once every couple of months. But I know that they all have 2FA protecting them. So I'm still at ease that I still don't need to change it. But just for the heck of it, it takes a couple of seconds to make that switch. So why not? You can never be too safe.
Awesome. Great. I did see another question come through, which we'll monitor here, but just to make sure we're getting to all of those topics that we want to touch on. The next topic that's up to discuss here is transitioning into a work from home environment. So as I'm sure many of the organizations in attendance today, the pandemic brought with it, the ability to work from anywhere. And some organizations were experiencing that for the very first time, but it also brought with it kids who were having to do virtual schooling from home while parents were there working as well. So if this scenario sounds like anything that you lived through in the past 12 months, you may have had a school-age kid, you may have had to take a day off work, you may have had another kid who wants the iPad, and the only device that was available was your work computer. And because you were in a bind, you gave your child your work computer to do whatever they needed to do, play games, view videos, view Netflix. And chances are you came back to that work computer and they weren't doing the same thing that you left them doing. They were on some other website, and all of a sudden they're using your work machine, which may have access to all of your cloud-based, files and all of your sensitive information, depending on your role in the organization. And you've basically handed that over to a child that has no parental controls, right? And sure, you can monitor that and police that, but really, how can you have that peace of mind in that scenario without some other measures in place, right? So that next important thing that we wanted to touch on is what does a firewall and kind of what does a layered security approach do for your in-home network primarily? So a big piece of that, of your in-home security is probably investing in a few devices that protect the integrity of your network at home. If you're traveling a lot for work, we're going to touch on VPN here in just a second, but there are measures that you can take as well to protect your security. But if you're setting up a home office, or if you're an organization that is transitioning to a work from home model, doing an assessment on what your employees are using to connect to their in-home network is super important. So I think part of that education comes from an understanding. So what exactly is a firewall? Our illustration here illustrates that pretty well. So a firewall is going to be an external device. Some of your out-of-the-box solutions might have firewall capability. What we find is if you're using a Comcast router or an AT&T router, chances are you would probably want to invest in some sort of external firewall for your in-home network if you're dealing with sensitive information from working from home, and or actually visit what those firewall features are for configuration. But what that firewall is going to do is allow some information through, depending on how the parameters are sent up, and not allow other information through. So it's going to bounce off and not allow you access to that site. As Michelle's going to demonstrate and brought up yesterday as we were talking, firewall is just one step of your layered security approach. So that firewall device that I have listed there is $100. So think $100 per employee. And we're giving parental controls. We're also giving ad block, and we're giving VPN. And that VPN is going to be a super important component for also protecting your IP address and your security at home. So what exactly is that? To understand what a VPN is, we have to understand what an IP address is. So any device that is connected to the internet has a unique signal called an IP address. So if you do an audit on how many devices you have connected to your home network and you have children, I guarantee you it's upwards to 20 to 30 devices between smartphones, gaming consoles, smart speakers, you name it, security cameras, everything has a unique signature. So in this shift to more accessible, the Internet of Things that we've had, so security cameras, monitors that have video that are connected via Wi-Fi, we all heard of like those scares of a baby monitor getting hacked, right? And all of a sudden an external source had the ability to view the baby's room in our house. That's done through the IP address. And where that access point is coming in is through your home network or through your modem and your router. So being able to protect or ghost some of that connection to your network is done through what's called a virtual private network or a VPN. So if you look at the illustration here, you're basically getting an overview of what a VPN does. You're connected to the internet. Without that VPN, it's a one-for-one connection, and you're going to have a true IP address, so that signature related to your device connected to the internet, right? What a VPN does is going to mask that IP address so that if someone is if your network is compromised or there's a hacker in your network, they will not be able to get access to your virtual to your IP address because you're using that VPN connection. So that in and of itself, if you're connecting anywhere publicly or even from your home and doing work-related things, is a great way to make sure that you have a secure connection to the internet. The unfortunate piece of this, and one of those big things that we hear when we're working with clients, is that VPNs will slow down some of your bandwidth speeds, right? Because you're pinging off of some different locations. You're adding an extra step when you're connecting to the internet. So a bandwidth conversation with your employees might coincide with this. If you have employees who are paying for the base minimum, internet package at their home and they're planning on working there for the foreseeable future, chances are either you as an organization or that employee needs to increase their bandwidth speeds for their in-home network, especially if they have kids and those kids are going to be on summer break while mom, dad, or parents are trying to do work, and everyone's taxing the network at the same time, and you're trying to be on a webinar, chances are you're probably going to want to increase your bandwidth speeds as well. So the higher the bandwidth, or the more bandwidth you have available, the less of an impact your VPN is having. So keep in mind when you're connecting in public spaces using a VPN, chances are those guest networks don't have a ton of bandwidth to them anyways. So you might experience some lag speeds in that. However, worth the security, especially if it's a public or guest network that you're connecting to. So hotels, hotel lobbies, public spaces, always super important to use that VPN. Another best practice to encourage your employees for that layered security approach is not to access any sensitive data or sensitive accounts in public spaces. I think that the ease of connecting via Wi-Fi to have everything available at the palm of our hands or in our laptops, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? So encouraging some of that common sense mentality of, why are you accessing our bank accounts when you're at Starbucks? This should be done in a secure environment, or at minimum, using a VPN when accessing that information. So some VPNs that are listed there, including that one that we just referenced, the firewall includes AdBlock, which Michelle will illustrate for us here in just a second, some parental controls for your in-home network and also that VPN. And then we also have IPVanish, NordVPN, PureVPN. All of these are pretty readily available and they're pretty low cost in the great scheme of things as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle to give us a demo of what a VPN looks like and works like.
Thank you. Let me quickly share my screen here. There we go. All right. So as Gregory put it, a VPN basically protects you from prying eyes. Here's a good little animated illustration, which I really quickly just Googled as he was talking. What a VPN does is if this is your computer on the left and you're accessing the internet on the right, most of that traffic is going in clear text. And people can see it if they're intercepting it, like your ISP can see that traffic. This is how they give you targeted ads when you're on YouTube. You get an ad of something you Googled because they're watching you, basically. So when you're in a public Wi-Fi, like a Starbucks or whatever, and you're connected to their network, it could be you're connected to a hacker's network, and they're intercepting everything you're doing, including your logins and stuff like that. So this is why we say if you're on a public network or accessing something secure remotely to your office, connect using a VPN. What that does, it encrypts your traffic in a tunnel, and anyone snooping into that tunnel can't really see what's happening and what's inside that traffic. To sort of give you an example of that, I'm connected to a VPN right now. And if I look at my IP address, this is my IP address currently. It says I'm in Canada, Ontario, but I'm not. So this is what a VPN basically does. It spoofs your location. If I look at my VPN itself, it says Canada, and I can switch servers to pretty much anywhere. And Gregory mentioned if you're using a VPN, sometimes the connection is slow. I'm on a video conference right now. I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully none of you have any lag or it's nice and smooth. But if you're using a proper paid product and a legitimate VPN service, you're not going to encounter any speed degradations. It won't be noticeable, at least. So I can change my server anytime and refresh the page, and my location will change here. That's one of the things a VPN does, protects you, masks your traffic. The other thing Gregory mentioned was around firewalls. So everyone should have a decent firewall at home. Most routers have firewalls built into it, a very basic one, but we should at least harden that security, because one of the other things a firewall does is ad blocking. So if I go to, or if all of you go to chicagotribune.com, let me refresh this page again. I go to Chicago Tribune and you try it yourself at home, you're not going to see the exact same page here. You are going to see a page full of ads. There's going to be an ad in the top here, this little empty area over here, that's actually an ad. There's probably a bunch of other empty spots here. These should have been ads, but I have an ad blocker running on my VPN itself, and not just on my browser. So it just blocks ads from my entire network. This is something a firewall or a DNS service does. So some of the benefits of that. If I want to prove that this is really an ad blocker, I can open up the same connection in there's something called BrowserLink, which opens a browser on the internet somewhere. So I have the same page open up. Let's do this one more time with the page timed out here. So let's refresh this, and it's going to open the same Chicago Tribune in someone else's browser on the internet, which doesn't have a file, which doesn't have an ad blocker on it. And very quickly you see here, the page looks slightly different. The ad popped up as a bar. There's another ad on the right here. So this is what your page should look like. So imagine ads are getting through. Some of these ads could be malicious, clickbait and stuff. You click on it and it opens up 5 different websites or pop-ups. You can click on something accidentally and install malware or ransomware. So a firewall will, by and large, protect you from a lot of those random clicks. Already, I'm being protected by not even being shown some of those things. Back to you.
Excellent. We had a question come through regarding LogMeIn, and I think there's an important distinction for everyone to be aware of here. What LogMeIn, or you might have done a Citrix receiver is another commonly used one, or Citrix machines. What you're actually doing when you're logging in through LogMeIn is remoting into either a virtual machine or a desktop solution that's in an off-premise location. So it's going to be following your security protocols that are set up in your office space, and not necessarily the native security protocols that are on your machine itself. So kind of an important distinction. Sure, that increases security. However, you're operating a machine within a machine, which sometimes can create a few user experience flaws in that process. However, a very kind of secure channel, as long as your office environment or wherever that machine is actually located is following and being kept as well. Michelle, any additional insight there?
Think of it this way: if you can log in remotely to your desktop, so can someone else. So the harder it is for you to log in remotely to your home PC through LogMeIn or VPN or whatever, make sure that password is secure, that username is not publicly advertised, and you have 2-factor on that thing. If you have all of that, then you should be okay. But if you have a admin as your username password, then anyone else can randomly try it and probably get in, or they're probably in, you just don't know it yet.
Your comment on admin or admin password combination. If you do have employees working from home, or if you haven't changed your router password or modem password, that is another really easy way for people to gain access to your in-home network is out of the box. Generally speaking, your router and modem is going to have the username admin and the password is going to be password. And typically in setting up that network in your home, you're going to change that. But if someone else configured that for you, that step may have been overlooked so that you could have done it yourself, and you maybe didn't take that step to do that. So checking in with your employees to make sure that their password for their in-home network and their router and modem are secure is also an important step in that process as well. Awesome. So then going into phishing, I know we're kind of running short on time, so we'll make this a little bit quicker on my end so Michelle can illustrate this, but we wanted to touch base on some of that common phishing schemes that are happening, and understanding what phishing is an important step in that process as well. So what that looks like is you may have received an email like this. A common one that was being brought up earlier today was a spoofed email from the CEO of an organization asking another employee to go out and purchase some gift cards. We've seen that one come through time and time again. I think he had the example of an email that came through, a phishing email that said her director couldn't stand up, so she needed her to do something. Anytime it feels funky, chances are it's not real, right? So where can we look on some of those things? Instead of going through the example that I have here with the email, Michelle actually has a illustration of this, so I will turn it back over to him so that we can walk through that together as well.
Yeah, thank you. Back to sharing screen. Here we go. So here's a phishing email that I control. I've sent it to myself. I send these phishing emails out to test security. If you get an email similar to this, it looks kind of legit. It says, hi, Adam, you've successfully turned on two-step verification on this mobile number ending in this. If you get something like this and you haven't, it may pique your curiosity and say, I didn't turn on two-step verification, which means someone else did. Someone from Russia did on this date using a Linux PC, that probably been hacked or whatever. The first thing you should do when you get emails like this is look at the from, and this is mail.com, but your Outlook will be similar to this, or Gmail. Click on the from address and look at the address itself. It's coming from LinkedIn at verification.com. The verification doesn't have an I in it. There's a spelling mistake here. So look for these type of obvious mistakes. And sometimes they're not too obvious because you're just clicking through, and we've all fallen for it. So look for that. Hover on some of the links. If I hover on this link here, on the bottom bar here, you see a long link, but it ends in something weird. So let's click on this. Normally I would ask you not to click on this, but since I've crafted this email, I know exactly where it goes. So if you look at the URL bar, if you've clicked on it, just verify the URL bar. It's still not a LinkedIn.com. It says linkedin.verification.com and then / whatever, but it doesn't end in linkedin.com. So this is someone trying to fool you. So this is a phishing page, a phishing landing page. No matter what I put in here, let's put in here, I don't know, Bob, password Bob123, and I click sign in. It's going to sign in because I've already signed into LinkedIn. And look at the bar now. It says linkedin.com / the settings page and stuff. Now it actually redirected to the actual LinkedIn page. So my alarms are not raised. I'm like, yeah, I just logged in. Nothing fishy really happened. But what happened in the back end? This is what a hacker sees. This is my hacker dashboard or whatever, my phishing dashboard. And I use something called GoFish. But in this dashboard, I see statistics. One email was sent, one was open, one was clicked, one person submitted their data. That's all me. If I look at the details, I see here at the bottom, I got the username Bob, I got the password, Bob1223. So I basically fished credentials. Now I can use these to log in to the actual LinkedIn.com, and end to end, this is a full life cycle of a phishing email. Learn how to recognize this, go slower, take your time when looking, reading, analyzing emails, and know that all it takes is everything I did today for a criminal to get through and look at your passwords. If there was two-factor authentication here, I would have been presented with the second factor, which the hacker would not have had. And this process would have been kind of useless. They would have had the password, but they would not have been able to log in. So real quick, this is how a phishing email works, and be cognizant of these little things, but it's all about deception.
Yep, and remediation of that, one thing that we like to tout is knowledge doesn't, live on a user-to-user basis. Getting that information out to other users that there was a potential phishing scheme that came through, and bringing awareness to that as an organization, whether that be on Slack or Teams or Google Hangouts. Just say, hey, this happened. If you're getting an email like this from someone, this isn't real. Really curtails some of that engagement. If you're not making those announcements to your team and you're remediating the problem with the user that had the issue, then you're potentially opening the door for other users to be compromised with the same issue, right? So the example that Michelle had was really well done. I've seen examples out there that are very clearly, once you take a step away, a phishing email that have been clicked on or that have led to a phishing attack. Keep in mind those credentials and downloading attachments, downloading malware are all some of those things that come out of those phishing schemes. And that's why it's such a crucial point to be aware of that and to bring attention to that as well. It also doesn't only happen in email. More and more commonly, you're getting text messages, so SMS phishing schemes that are coming through, and similar things to look out for. If it's ever a link shortener that's coming from your bank or coming from a source like that, be very, very leery and block those numbers once you realize those, but also share that information if it has anything to do with your organization, with your team as well. Right.
Add voice-based phishing to that, which is called vishing. So it falls into the same category.
Yep. Perfect. So then lastly, what we wanted to touch on was just kind of the health and maintenance of your browser, your machines, and your devices, right? So very quickly, to kind of bring things to a partial close for today, what are some of those things that we can do to make sure that our users are staying on top of their devices and making sure that they're keeping all of their equipment healthy if they're working from home, right? So having some sort of practices, or at least encouraging people to clear their cache and delete their cookies on a regular basis. There could be some sensitive information. If there is some sort of malware on the device, it could be tracking what accounts you're logging into through your cache and cookies. So making sure that you're clearing that information out from your browser on a regular basis is best practice. More importantly, though, I would say keeping those browsers, your operating system. I can't tell you how many users, if we're not managing the organization, have an operating system that's due for an update. More and more now, because there are more attacks, there are more backdoors being left open because new features are being rolled out. There's a new operating system every other week, it seems like. Keeping those systems and up to date is essential. And also that goes for your in-home network equipment as well. So your firmware on your router and your modem is an important step to check in. It should be set to auto update, but if you haven't logged into your in-home network since you activated the network however many years ago, chances are it would be good to take a look at and make sure that the firmware is up to date. Those are really good at capturing some of those security protocols that may have been rolled out from year over year or month over month. And like we've touted as well, those password storage tools are an important piece of that, making sure that even though it's available to your users, that they're not saving all of their passwords to their browser or to their Apple keychain, and using some sort of secure environment for that as well. Michelle, anything to add there?
Oh, I mean, that kind of covered it. And, the main gist of this is layered security approach. So security is not just one product or service. It's putting many layers in front of the adversary. So if the adversary has to spend time, resources, and expertise to breach you or your companies, they're going to move on to the next weaker target.
Absolutely. And then lastly here, what are some of those key takeaways, some defense tips that you can walk away with today, feeling a little bit more secure? So we've talked a lot about password managers. We've talked a lot about that multi-factor authentication, making sure that you're, if someone has access to your password, that there's some other step in that process for you to catch that before your account is compromised. Backing up devices on a regular basis, pushing things to cloud-based storage in a secure environment is another good takeaway. Just preaching and practicing that privacy, that goes into VPNs, that goes into firewall, clearing browser cache and cookies, all creates a more private connection to the internet and to different websites and using browsers and things like that. And then really kind of think about where is your general user, where are your teammates in terms of cybersecurity awareness. So if you took a lot out of this presentation of things that you can impart in your team, that's great. Heightening just your general approach and your general awareness as an organization is going to make you that much more confident and that much more secure, right? So, and then that cybersecurity framework, if you are a larger organization, I can let Michelle end with this as well. There are some very fundamental things in applying a little budget to cybersecurity for your organization and applying some of that cybersecurity framework is a great step. Do you have a little bit more to say about that?
Sure. Just like we apply, a health check to our own physical health, cybersecurity requires the same. And cybersecurity frameworks do exactly that, a checklist of everything you should be doing, where do you score, and what does your cybersecurity posture look like. Whatever the posture is, the goal is to heighten the state of security, and become better than what you were before you did that health check. The aim is not to be absolutely secure. There's no such thing. It's impossible because that's a moving target. You're constantly changing, but it's to be more secure than you were before, so that the likelihood of you getting compromised is, approaching zero and not absolutely zero. So it's just unless you're checking it and testing it, you're not doing much, and it's all in theory. As you've seen, we like to put everything to the test. We like to show you demos. We like to practice security, and we practice what we preach.
Awesome. And with that, a big thank you to Gene and the Philanthropy Club. A big thank you to Key and Forefront. Michelle, you're amazing. I've so enjoyed our time collaborating on this presentation. And we'll leave chat open here for a few minutes if anyone else has some additional questions to throw out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we can take a look at, we'll leave that up there for the context. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So one thing that you didn't touch, so we're talking about malware now rather than viruses, right?
Correct. So basically synonymous.
Okay, so
yep.
if all of us have a virus protection, something that we subscribe to, and there are a lot of them out there on the market, so it's kind of hard to decide what's good and what's not good, and what firewall is adequate in that package. Any clues as to how to be a good shopper?
Yeah, the most important thing on my side would be most malware that you're going to be paying for is doing the job only if the user is keeping it up to date. So keep in mind there's new malware that's out there on a regular basis. And just like your operating system, if you're running outdated malware detection software on your machine, chances are that it's not going to be detecting the latest and greatest. So I would say Malwarebytes is the one that is the most cost effective that we kind of tout to some of our nonprofit partners. A lot of your VPN or your Bitdefender as kind of a total package will have a malware antivirus solution as a part of it. The key in whatever solution you're using is making sure that it's up to date before you're performing those checks. Michelle, anything else?
Yeah, as long as you have something in place, you should be good enough. Even the built-in Windows Defender is pretty good as an antivirus defense mechanism. Again, put multiple layers in the path. Malware and antivirus defense is one, which is necessary in most cases. On a Linux or Mac, I wouldn't push too much for it. I personally don't have any antivirus running on my Mac or my Linux machines because I don't need any. The threat there is very little. So it depends on your threat level. In Windows, the majority of malware is written to attack Windows computers. So you absolutely need one there. The default is pretty good. But like Gregory mentioned, I use Malwarebytes as well for years. It's probably one of the best malware defense for personal use and for corporate use. But yeah, these things will increase. A question that came up in the chat is, do you anticipate all of this to increase exponentially in the future? Yes, it already is. And it will not slow down. Are there any laws that are making these more difficult? No. They want to, but laws are always extremely slow. By the time a law is implemented, it's too late. It's years have passed and hackers have moved on to something else, something better. So this is a realm that you need to be proactive, and you cannot be reactive and depend on products or laws or services to come forth. You have to do the hunting yourself, find out the best solutions. You have people like us, companies like us who help out, organizations like us who care. And we're here to have that proactive defense mechanisms in place.
Definitely. And there was a Facebook ad, and we don't need to get into Facebook security or anything like that of what they're doing with our information. However, the ad really illustrated that the internet, started in 1996, and it's not that long ago. And think of those amazing changes that have occurred, and a lot of the legislation that is dictating what's happening in the internet hasn't really been updated since that initial inception of it. So to Michelle's point, staying proactive in that process, making sure we didn't touch on it, but if there's a cyber policy or some sort of insurance that you're trying to qualify for, making sure that you're meeting those expectations so that you're protecting if it is something essential to your organization is another step that you can take, and adding and layering on some additional protection if the need really calls for it for you to get funding or anything like that. The other question that came through was about personal information. And so if you do have some sort of compromising situation, like the question here says, the person's husband lost or had their personal information compromised, is there anything other than Experian or credit check services that you can do? Obviously, that is the best step to take just to monitor that. But if you haven't gone through and changed credentials, that would be another important step. Heighten those multi-factor authentication steps where you can, just so that you're aware that if someone is trying to compromise information or sign up for a credit card, security questions are a huge one, and Michelle can probably have a whole class on hacking personal information. But it's not hard to figure out someone's core security of what high school they went to, or what make or model of their first car they drove, based on a casual conversation that you would be having with someone. So being strategic in some of those security questions, multi-factor authentication for all of those accounts as well, is my other recommendation in that process. Michelle, anything else?
Yeah, that question is a very loaded question, because you're right, I can spend an entire week, and I give courses on privacy. I have privacy services on the side as well, but that's a personal privacy cleanup process that you need to do, not just Experian. There are 6 credit bureaus, the 3 major ones that you need to freeze your credit on, and then the minor ones. That's how I do it. Protect everything. It's a very long, lengthy process, but I believe everyone should at least start that journey of protecting your privacy and your security. Those 2 things go hand in hand. If I don't know your primary email address to your bank account or any important login, where do I even start? So privacy actually has a huge role in protecting on the cybersecurity realm. The information that was hacked, according to that question, I would say if you keep all your stuff private, your emails, your phone numbers, your everything else, and you don't advertise everything, like Gregory mentioned, your dog's name or the first school that you went to, I can just go on Facebook and look that stuff up. That entire field is called open source intelligence. It's openly available. That's something I specialize in. But yeah, try to minimize your online exposure, because that makes you more vulnerable. And that same concept applies to the organization, the individual, your kids, pretty much everyone. The less you're exposed, the less you are vulnerable.
Excellent. Perfect.
Well, is there one other thing about the phishing? I've been told that if you try to unsubscribe from something unknown, you may be giving the same access. Can you talk just a little bit about when not to unsubscribe?
Sure. So if it's a phishing email, don't unsubscribe, because remember the phishing email I showed you, I'm sharing on the screen here. There are multiple links here. If I hover over any of the links, they all go to the same phishing page. So there's an unsubscribe link somewhere here, or maybe I didn't put it, but usually there it comes. Let's say this last link said unsubscribe. It says LinkedIn services. If I click on it, it takes me to that same phishing page. It's going to redirect in a second. So the same exact page comes up. So yeah, if this is a phishing email, don't click on unsubscribe. And first and foremost, don't subscribe to emails like that, or corporate accounts. Like, don't have a LinkedIn account with your corporate email address. This way, you're not going to get any junk on your primary work email address. Create a second email account, a Yahoo, a Gmail, or whatever, just for junk. So have multiple email accounts and compartmentalize your life this way, so that if you're getting, like, I get a lot of Amazon phishing emails on a Yahoo or a Hotmail email, which I know I don't even have an account on Yahoo on Amazon. So I very quickly know that this is phishing, even though sometimes they do a pretty good job. But so keep your junk life separate, your junk email separate from your work and corporate environment. And that's probably one more layer of security and privacy you can put in front.
Probably a good rule to apply to a lot of work-life balance. Keep your junk separate,
Yep.
Excellent. Anything else there, Jean?
I think it's, I've learned a lot, and I hope that, oh yes, I do have one more question. I know if an attendee is at an organization and would like to recommend an assessment of the risk or the security level, does the cost of such a thing correlate kind of directly with this number of employees or the number of computers, or how can you anticipate if you want to go back to your organization and say we need to really get a statement of where our vulnerabilities are?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I can take a shot at that question. It depends on what type of assessment you're doing. I mean, I hate answers that start with depends, but it depends. But it really does. So if it's a risk assessment, an organizational risk assessment, the number of employees doesn't really matter, because your resources are the same. Whether you have 5 employees or 500, you still have one email server, you still have one domain, one whatever. So it really doesn't matter too much there. But if you're trying to do a vulnerability scan the entire network, the bigger the network, the more time and resources it will take. And once you get into the nitty-gritty details, let's say you hired me to do a phishing email campaign. I need to attack the organization using a phishing email. It's going to matter whether you tell me to attack 100 emails or 1,000 emails. It's the time factor there kind of plays in. So overall, I say everyone should start with a risk assessment, a broad cybersecurity risk assessment, which is technical and non-technical in nature. You combine pretty much everything under the sun, and that's very generic. With that, now you get a roadmap on where to go next. Where were your gaps? It's basically a gap analysis, and then you move on from there. Then the consultant will tell you, okay, you need X, Y, Z first, then the other things later, or this is high priority, this is low priority, this will cost you more, this is a low bar of entry, MFA is just a click away, or this firewall may cost you a lot. So there's so many variables that will come out of it, but start with an assessment, just like in the healthcare, you start with a health check and then you go deeper into the specifics.
Thank
And
you.
then my only addition to that would be if budget is super tight and there's just constraints. I mean, hosting a seminar like this for employees to attend just to increase everyone's kind of technology awareness and cybersecurity awareness could be a good first step as well. But yeah, if there isn't a budget set aside and that you think there is an immediate need, awareness and some encouragement for best practices is also a good place to start.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Last chance. Anybody else have a question that they want to get into the discussion? Well, I'm sure with Zoom fatigue, nobody will care if you have extra 5 minutes to go grab a cup of coffee. Thank you very much, Michelle and Gregory. I think it's been a useful program. I will invite all of you who have now known about the Philanthropy Club to come back next month, July. Oh, actually, it's not next month. It's July 29th. That doesn't seem right. No, that's the registration, August 3rd. It is next month. Okay, August 3rd, the next Philanthropy Club about toward racial equity. And so I thank you all and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jean.
Pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.